Hey everybody, welcome to the PixelBlips October Spooktacular. I guess we're calling it the Spooktacular. Today we're talking about Resident Evil, or as everyone else knows it,
Biohazard.
Resident Evil.
Oh, never mind. I thought you were gonna go with like the Japanese name or the Biohazard.
You can't call it Biohazard here in the States.
It won't sell.
That's a heavy metal band.
It's a metal band. Anyway.
Anywho, so my first experience with Resident Evil, because I wasn't a PlayStation gamer right away. My first experience with Resident Evil came a lot later than everyone else's. My first Resident Evil game I played was Resident Evil 2. A friend of ours said, "Hey, you need to do this.
You need to play this game."
And like it was in the middle of I want to say it was June, right after I just beaten Metal Gear Solid or something. So it was summer months, so I had tons of free time, and I ate it up. I think I beat both discs in a weekend, brought it back to him and said, "I want Resident Evil 3. He gave me 3, and then I was like, "I want whatever's next." And he was like, "Well,
that's in development. You gotta wait for the GameCube version."
No, he was like, "Well, you don't have a Dreamcast or a PS2, so here's Resident Evil 1." And going back and having played 2 and 3 and then having to go back to 1 was very upsetting.
Yeah, 1 was not the best game.
I mean, there's certain things in 1 that I really like, and we'll talk when we talk about the next game after Resident Evil Nemesis. We'll talk about the thing I like.
Okay.
But Jill Sandwich.
It's a name.
Jill Sandwich.
That is a name.
You almost became a Jill Sandwich. If you watched our last episode we posted on Sunday, we talked about bad translations in the PlayStation era, and this is like paramount. She's the master of unlocking. Really? She's also going to be a Jill Sandwich. Really? And like while there was that hokiness in Resident Evil 2, and even more so in 3 than 2, it wasn't, oh my God, roll your eyes and want to run out of the room.
I mean, it's not like we're not just going to talk about the games. We're going to talk about the movies.
Yeah, we're going to talk about everything.
But like, to be honest, I've never actually really played much of a Resident Evil game. I know, right? I've played more of other series. And I think part of it is when those games came out, I wasn't really into survival horror games. Like I didn't want to play a game where there was like zombies and it was dark and I was gonna die, because not being able to see crap always really pisses me off in games.
Yeah, and tank controls.
And the controls were not great.
Which little personal tidbit. If you guys remember the early days of G4, they had a radio talk call-in show called G4TV.com.
Yeah.
And I called in to defend the Resident Evil tank controls, and here's why. And here's why I really, for that type of game, the tank control is really good. In those games, they're trying to replicate a George Romero zombie movie.
Yes.
And since we've been trained to do headshots and to be good at these things, you need to change the controls to purposely make it harder for the player to succeed.
I would say at that era, specifically when RE2 came out, we really hadn't had a lot of those kind of games. Now, yes, there have been first-person shooters on the console at that point, but not a lot of them, and not a lot of them were very good.
Yeah.
So as far as the argument of we've been trained, when RE2 came out, we really hadn't been.
Well, not so much in first-person controls, but
or
we
even
had
on
been
third-person controls, because I mean, most of them were static backgrounds that you would just run through Final Fantasy style.
Yep. But we had been trained with how to quickly respond with things like Sonic the Hedgehog, the platforming in Mario. We had gotten used to certain ways of controlling something, even in a three-dimensional space at that point, with things like Doom. So you needed to put a roadblock in front of people.
Yeah, you couldn't just pop headshots and call it a day, because, I mean, your guy basically...
You needed the guy to be...
He just rotated 360 degrees, and then he just pointed, and if he hit the guy, great. If he didn't, well, shoot again, but you got limited ammo.
Yes. They had to make it harder for you to succeed, is what I'm saying. Yes. And I think the tank controls do a good job of that.
Oh, it does make it way harder to succeed in that game.
Yeah.
But it is, for some people like me, it would have been
for what would have been a really simple game in the outset.
Yeah, it would have been, frustrating to the point of, I'm done with this, and I would walk away.
Snap. Controller's dead. Dave, out.
Stomp.
You're dead.
Yeah. So, really, I hate to say this, the first game that I played in the RE series was, and I only played like an hour of it because I borrowed it from somebody, was RE5, and I couldn't get very far.
I'm going to let you borrow RE4 once you're done with Dragon Quest then.
Yeah. Because I didn't like everything I had ever read about Resident Evil, right, was it is this spooky third-person game, but
which is not Resident Evil 5.
Which is not. No, it's totally like here's a third-person shooter, and there are zombies everywhere, and we're gonna name this character Chris.
Yeah.
And that's go.
Yes.
It was all right enough. Part of it was I just suck at third-person shooters on the console.
A lot more, but a lot of the problem is going to be going forward is, as we're talking about this episode, the next episode, is that this series has had a problem maintaining itself.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, they're trying to take the games and make them more modern. Like they're trying to add modern touches to these games, and what made those games great, in your opinion, and
is the clunkiness.
Is how clunky the controls were. How
like the best Resident Evil game is Resident Evil Code Veronica, or Veronica X.
Yeah,
the same game, slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's why that is because it does a good job of melding the 3D aspect of moving in a 3D world with the controls that are clunky, that do make you kind of stop and think. Resident Evil 4 is, I don't like it as much because of the story, but the controls in it are a little bit closer to you have to stop, plant your feet, and shoot.
Which, I mean, that's kind of what you would do in a lot of situations.
Yeah, in real life. And you kind of have to, the reason for that is they have to make it scary somehow.
Yeah.
Unlike the next thing that we're going to talk about in the next episode, zombies by themselves, like a zombie by himself isn't scary. It's sad.
A whole bunch of them.
Yeah. Like a room full of them, yes, that's scary, but a single zombie is not scary. So you kind of need to impede the player in such a way to make these things scary.
Yeah.
And Nemesis is scary.
Nemesis is
not in the movies. Not in the movies. Nemesis is not scary.
I
Nemesis is sad in the movies.
In general, I don't think the movies are scary. I think they
I think the first one did a good job of being a scary zombie movie. And because they built the underground area where the movie takes place in such a way that it was very odd. You didn't know what was going to happen one moment to the next.
Yeah.
It was gory and weird and good.
Yeah.
Stopping from that, I really don't know how that movie series has continued on, except the fact that they're just... the next one's going to be crazier than the last. And
well, I mean...
Mila Jovovich.
Having watched the first movie just in the last week, I'm sitting there going, okay, it doesn't... It throws out all these terms, right? Like, it throws out the T whatever virus.
Yeah, it's a movie in the universe of the game.
And it's a plausible, reboot of the series, but whatever. But I was not, at any point when I was watching that movie, I didn't feel like this was a horror film. I felt like this is a action movie that has zombies in it.
Yeah, kind of like the remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Right? There we go.
And it seems like that's what they're trying to impart into the games. They're like, wow, these action-based, like real super action-y games or movies are doing really well. Let's try to make the games like that. And that's kind of what happened with RE5 and RE6. And, with RE6 specifically, like when I was playing, I got to a point where there's a whole bunch of zombies and you don't have enough ammo or extra things to take them out. You basically just have to clear a path and then run to the next checkpoint. And I was like, well, that kind of sucks. But, I mean, it just seemed like that's just not good design, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just these zombies and they just keep coming.
Well,
there's no stopping them. There is no end to them. Like, I sat there, just to see what would happen. I flipped on an infinite ammo mode so I could just sit there and keep headshotting them, which, by the way, headshots takes 3 shots to kill them.
Weird. Really weird.
Yeah, because it's like...
Because in RE4, they're down. Well, unless the parasite comes out of their neck.
But whatever. I mean, it's just...
The thing is, like, the reason I say Code Veronica is like the best one is because the atmosphere in that game is so oppressive and scary. And that is what is scary in Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. Not so much in 3. 3 is more... Nemesis is more of an action game. But the atmosphere that your character is not going to make it out of this alive unless you are freaking perfect at this game.
Yes.
And Code Veronica has that.
Yeah, and 5 and what I played of 5 and so far what I played of 6, not so much.
4 doesn't have that. 4 has we're going to put this action, we're going to make you an action hero and then make another character the one that is always in danger, not
the
you.
one that you have to save.
Yeah, and that I think is when Resident Evil as a series starts to kind of spiral a bit.
Yeah. Well, and with what I've played of 6, as I said, I've only played like the first chapter of one of the guy's stories.
So you bought 6?
Yes, let's go with that. uh, it's just it is real action based, and there are quick time events everywhere. Like you get hit with a zombie, you have to wiggle, you have to
Well,
spam a button.
it feels
or-
like instead of like in the first generation and into Code Veronica, Resident Evil was its own thing,
yes.
and other games tried to be Resident Evil.
And now Resident Evil is trying to
Resident
be
Evil,
other
yeah,
games.
Resident Evil 4 on Forward, Resident Evil's trying to be other games.
Yeah,
And I think that's where we're getting. Like, I really want to play that Resident Evil Revelations because everyone says like, if you liked Code Veronica, you need to play
Oh,
that.
that's the one where they're on a boat, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Never thought I'd be on a boat.
Yeah, they're on. I was looking on Steam, and I'm like, well, 6 is cheap.
The other thing, they have a really
Revelations
cool,
is out. 5 is just not nice.
Yeah, as we're wrapping this up, so my suggestion, if you want to play a good Resident Evil game, is play 2.
Yeah.
If you want to play a really good Resident Evil game, play 4. If you want to play the best one, Code Veronica.
If you could, yeah, for the Dreamcast, the PS2.
And they even have an HD remaster for the PS3.
Yeah, so there you go. Play some Code Veronica.
There's also one that I really like, just because it uses the gun con,
Mm-hmm.
called Dead Aim, where you actually, on the back of the gun con, there's a little gamepad,
Little D-pad.
cross D-pad, and you have to move your guy around. And you move your guy around and then stop, and you bring the gun up to shoot. It's really fun.
Oh, that's neat.
And it kind of foreshadows how things work in the Resident Evil games in the future.
Yeah. And the movies are good. They're good popcorn movies, right?
Yeah, if you want to watch a movie, watch the first one.
Well, I mean, and in general, like I've heard that all the other movies.
The second one wasn't good.
They're highly action movies. I'm not
The
saying
third
they're
one,
good.
when they're in the desert, is okay. I liked it.
And then the last one where they brought back Michelle Rodriguez because I guess they cloned everybody.
But isn't there? Wait,
They brought.
hasn't
her,
there been 5?
I don't know how many of these movies there are.
I don't know.
I mean, it's
The first
it is-
one.
It is probably one of the most successful
Video
game
game
to movie
adaptations.
transitions.
In terms of dollars, not in terms of content.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like if they keep making money off the movies, they're gonna keep making them,
Yeah.
right? And like I said,
Also,
they're
the
good popcorn
CG
movies.
CG movies are pretty good too.
Oh, and the animated ones that they've done.
Yeah, the animated ones are very
pretty
good.
too.
Pretty good.
So Resident Evil is a great series. I really wish that the new games would be more like the old games, where you had the impediment of you kind of have
That
to
they were
stop.
scary?
That they were scary, and that maybe they're less action oriented and
Yeah.
more
But I think that's the
thought
thi-
like thinking man's horror game.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with survival horror is
Mm-hmm.
it kind of has to be a little harder on you.
Yeah.
Like
I
the
mean,
Last of Us. The Last of Us is kind of like the aiming's not spot on. The
Well, no.
controls aren't really responsive. It takes a long time to go through the animations. All that adds into there are times when you're actually fearful of things.
Yeah, because it's like, oh no, Ellie's gonna die or whatever. Yeah. I mean, a game like that does it fairly well, but I mean, when you go into
It's still not horror.
it is not. Yeah, it's not supposed to be a
Yeah.
straight up horror game.
Yeah.
Things like Amnesia are crazy, but they're not survival horror games. They're just horror games, and you just need to play through them.
Yeah, Slender Man.
Yes, Slenderman.
Ah!
Yeah. So I mean, Resident Evil is a series that still exists, and they're still pumping out games for it. They're still doing movies and stuff for it, and I'm glad that series is still around. I just wish they would go back to their roots.
Yeah.
And kind of make it a little bit clunkier, a little bit.
I think
a little bit more of a thinking man's game.
to end this on a downer note, I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it
because
probably won't. I'm sure RE7 will be.
Resident Evil Revelations sold this much.
RE6.
RE6 sold this much. It's just like,
So yeah, RE7's probably going to be more, 7's going to be more like 6 than it is Revelations or 2 or anything like that. But it will be a next gen game.
Yep.
So it'll look really pretty.
Don't forget to hold on to your ink ribbons and aim for the head. We'll see you in a bit.